Hello, thanks for joining us. Today I want to talk about the timing and some of the strategic ways to think about applying for the PPP. We keep hearing that this is going to be an incredibly popular program, and I don't doubt that it will. But the timing that you apply for the PPP loan should be dictated by the strategy in terms of how you want to use it. Are we looking for access to capital, or are we truly looking for forgiveness of the loan? Depending on those two approaches, we're going to time our application in a different way. And what are some of the unknowns that we have, and when might we have those resolved? So we already talked about what are the costs that go into that payroll cost that defines the amount of loan one can get. And so I wanted to take a quick look at just kind of by the numbers. We know we have $349 billion currently set aside in this program. So how many small business employees are there out there? Well, according to the SBA, there's 58,900,000 that work for employers of 500 or less. If we go back and take a look at what was their average individual income, the most recent I found was from the Bureau of Labor Statistics for 2017, but at that point in time, it was $31,099. So if everybody applied at that amount, what would be the taxation on what would be the amount of loans people were going for against that $349 billion? Well, at 100%, that comes out to about $382 billion. That figure tells me there is going to be a rush to this. We are going to need to monitor the available funds, but 100% of these people are not going to be applying today. In fact, 100% of these people cannot apply today. Those who are just independent contractors won't have this access until April the 10th. And I know a lot of banks have been having a hard time ramping up to take applications today. All that to say, while I know you're antsy about it, I know there's anxiety about it, we don't necessarily need to have our application in today. And I'd caution us to pause for a second and really think about how it is we want to use these funds. Do we want to use the funds for access for capital? Bird in hand. We want to get moving on the PPP as soon as reasonably possible. Again, it doesn't have to be today. If that's the case, assume you're limited to no forgiveness, that we're going to leverage that capital on hand and we're going to use the good terms. When this is treated as a loan, we're going to have a term of 2 years and an interest rate of 1%. That did increase last night based off of that 0.5% interest before SBA guidance late last night. So if you don't have adequate access to capital, this can be a good use of capital. However, the strategy that we propose is that we want to maximize the forgiveness for this loan. And to do so, we're going to need payroll costs back in the practice. That would be delay and monitor. Time your application for the practice reopening. That will maximize the forgiveness. Keep in mind, the SBA's guidance continues to hold that 75% of the forgivable amount has to go to payroll cost. So, bird in hand, need for capital, no further funding or separate action, and Friday's going to be crazy. Or, forgiveness of the loan. Capital is adequate for several months. We're going to ramp up the practice, but do want you to reach out to your banker and make sure that you're monitoring the availability. The timing of this also matters based off of that strategy. If we are going to apply today and we don't have staff back in the practice yet, our payroll cost actually incurred is going to be limited, as well as the provision that states we need to keep the same number, the same head count, as a multiple of that forgiveness that we're asking. There's a third strategy in there as well. Those who have decided to continue to pay their payroll throughout this entire duration. If a individual, a staff, goes on unemployment prior to April 26th, but is rehired by June 30th, then they fit that exemption for rehire. So if you're currently paying your staff and you're going to use these PPP funds immediately to fund that payroll cost, please make sure that you're dedicated to pay them all the way through to June 30th, or they take an action before April 26th. So what are those three strategies? One, our staff is currently on unemployment, but we want access to capital. Make sure that your staff, if they're not currently on unemployment, goes on unemployment by April 26th. Take advantage of what the CARES Act provided in terms of that income continuity. Use unemployment to lower your practice's operating costs. Apply for access to capital, but understand its restricted uses and view it as a loan. Second strategy, if you plan to pay your staff throughout this entire time and are committed to continuing to have them on payroll until June 30th, 2020, then go ahead, apply soon. Take advantage of that 8 weeks of payroll cost relief and some of the utility relief and rent relief that come along with this. It's a good use of the PPP, but we're missing the use of the unemployment provisions provided in the CARES Act. And then finally, the strategy that if we can get the timing right, we believe is going to be the best, is utilizing both to their fullest extent. So, staff is currently on unemployment. We believe our patients may be rewarded. If your staff is on unemployment, or if not, make sure they will be by April 26th. Use unemployment to lower practice operating costs. Take the loan out in advance of ramping back up, but please make sure that you delay, you monitor, and we see how these funds are actually being used. In all three of those scenarios, we have a couple of action steps that we'd want you to take just to be as prepared as possible. Keep in mind, you can't use the idle dollars for the same expenses that you use these PPP dollars for. Reach out to that banker. They're going to guide what they need to get the loan as well as to give the forgiveness. So prepare your application. Create a contact with an SBA lender. Choose your strategy. Is it that good strategy where we're utilizing unemployment and we're taking a loan? Is it that better strategy, and better only in the context of utilizing the PPP dollars, where we're going to keep our staff paid throughout, and so we want access to this capital as soon as possible, all else equal, delaying is going to give us the same result? Or what we believe might be the best strategy in terms of utilizing these federal dollars, but does introduce some timing risk in terms of the availability of these funds. Utilize unemployment to continue to have operating costs as low as possible. When we look like we're going to be able to open back up again, apply for that PPP. Use it to get that payroll cost and ensure we're able to get that forgiveness. One thing that we're trying to make sure everybody kind of knows out there, after you receive your loan, whether that be the EIDL or the PPP funds, put those deposits in a separate account if possible than your practice checking account. There are restricted uses. There will be a need to justify the expenditures that you had, and keeping our powder dry and those dollars separate and only using for those explicit purposes is not only going to help you in getting that forgiveness, but your accountant's going to be very happy that you had those separate, because these are tax-free dollars. So the strategy, the action should depend on what your strategic use of the funds are. There's a lot of media coverage on this. We're going to see a lot of issues with the banks ramping up. We're going to hear about a rush to the door. I'd make sure that we pause and we think about what do we actually want to accomplish to ensure our actions are aligned with our goals. Thank you very much.